7 pregnant inmates should have been impossible. The women's section of Lakewood Correctional was strictly segregated from the men's facility, but during 6 weeks of solitary confinement in 2021, something unthinkable happened. 7 female inmates became pregnant while in complete isolation. When one of them was found dead in her cell, just days before she was scheduled to testify about what really happened, the prison claimed suicide, but the evidence told a different story. The autopsy revealed Vanessa Mitchell was strangled after someone had carefully injected enough sedatives into her system to prevent her from fighting back. The cameras covering her cell block had mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 43 minutes that night, and the guard assigned to her protection was reassigned without explanation just hours before her death. But here's what makes this case truly disturbing. 3 different correctional officers had reported suspicious activity involving female inmates being removed from their cells during overnight hours. All 3 were fired within weeks for unrelated violations. And when Vanessa's family demanded the prison release her personal effects, they discovered her journal was missing. A journal her cellmate says contained names, dates, and details about who was responsible for the pregnancies. Someone inside Lakewood Correctional didn't want the truth exposed, and they were willing to commit murder to keep it buried. Vanessa Mitchell never planned to end up in prison. At 26, she had been a nursing student with a 4-year-old daughter named Lily. Friends described her laugh as infectious, the kind that made everyone in a room turn and smile. Her mother, Patricia, still keeps Vanessa's half-finished knitting projects in a basket by the couch, a pale yellow baby blanket she was making for her sister's child, and a tiny purple hat that would never be worn. "She called me every Sunday without fail," Patricia says, twisting her wedding ring as she speaks. "Even after she got arrested. She'd tell me about her classes in prison, how she was helping some of the older ladies with their medications, always trying to nurse people, even in there." Vanessa had been sentenced to 18 months for prescription fraud. She'd written fake prescriptions using her nursing school access, not to sell but to help her daughter's severe asthma when their insurance denied coverage for an essential medication. A mistake, yes. A crime, technically, but not one that should have ended with her in a body bag. "The last time we spoke," Patricia whispers, "she told me something strange was happening at night. She sounded scared. She said, 'Mom, if anything happens to me, you need to tell them to check the staff schedules from February through April, the overnight shifts. Someone's falsifying records.'" Patricia wipes her eyes. 2 days later, they called to tell me she was dead. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking is what Vanessa left behind. 4-year-old Lily asks every day when her mommy is coming home. Patricia hasn't found the words to explain that she never will. Among Vanessa's possessions returned to the family was a stack of handmade cards she'd created for Lily's future birthdays, one for each year until her 18th. She'd planned to give them to her daughter after her release. The card for Lily's 5th birthday, which occurred 3 weeks after Vanessa's death, reads, "Mommy will be home soon, Princess. Just a few more months, and we'll have ice cream for breakfast like I promised." According to her cellmate, Jennifer Watson, Vanessa had discovered something that put her in danger. "The pregnancies weren't supposed to happen, not just because we were in isolation, but because they weren't consensual," Jennifer explained in a sworn affidavit. Vanessa figured out which guards were taking women from their cells at night. She knew their names, their schedules. She wrote it all down. Jennifer claims that Vanessa had been collecting information for weeks, carefully documenting patterns. She was going to report everything to the Prison Oversight Committee. She had a meeting scheduled for Monday morning. Vanessa was found dead on Saturday night. The medical examiner noted ligature marks on Vanessa's wrists that suggested she had been restrained before death. Her toxicology report showed high levels of lorazepam, a sedative not prescribed to her and not typically available to inmates. And despite the prison's initial suicide ruling, there was no suicide note, no history of suicidal ideation in her records, and her last call to her mother had been full of plans for her release in 4 months. What happened to Vanessa Mitchell wasn't just a tragedy. It was a murder designed to silence her. When Detective Thomas Blackwell from the county sheriff's office arrived to investigate Vanessa's death, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The scene had been cleaned before I got there, he noted in his initial report. The cell was spotless. That's not protocol for an inmate death investigation. Blackwell requested the security footage from that night, only to be told by Warden Harold Bennett that technical difficulties had caused a system-wide camera failure from 11:17 p.m. until 12 a.m., precisely when Vanessa died, according to the medical examiner's estimate. When Blackwell asked to see maintenance records for the camera system, he was told those records required a court order. "I've investigated 17 inmate deaths in my career," Blackwell would later testify at a state hearing. "I've never been stonewalled like this, never had basic evidence denied, never had to fight for every scrap of information. But here's what makes this investigation even more disturbing. 3 weeks after Blackwell began asking questions, he was removed from the case. His supervisor cited budget constraints and jurisdictional issues, despite the sheriff's department having clear authority to investigate deaths at county facilities. The case was transferred to the prison's Internal Affairs Division, the very people Vanessa had planned to expose. The internal investigation concluded within 72 hours that Vanessa had committed suicide by strangling herself with a bedsheet. The report made no mention of the sedatives in her system, the ligature marks on her wrists, or the fact that the bedsheet supposedly used wasn't long enough to create the injuries found on her neck. When Patricia Mitchell requested copies of the investigation files through her attorney, she was denied access. When she organized a protest outside the prison, none of the local media showed up, despite confirmation they'd received her press release. And when she finally managed to get a meeting with the county prosecutor, she was told there wasn't enough evidence to justify reopening the case. "It felt like hitting a wall everywhere we turned," Patricia says. "Like someone very powerful didn't want anyone looking too closely at what happened to my daughter." But Patricia wasn't the only one fighting for answers. The families of the 7 pregnant inmates began asking questions too. How had their daughters, sisters, and wives become pregnant while in solitary confinement? Why were they all receiving different explanations from prison officials? And why were the women themselves reluctant to talk about what had happened? Laura Simmons, whose daughter Rebecca was one of the pregnant inmates, recalls, "Becky wouldn't tell me anything on the phone. She just kept saying, 'They listen to everything, Mom. I can't talk about it.' She was terrified. I've never heard my daughter sound like that." Rebecca Simmons gave birth to a son 4 months after Vanessa's death. She was released on parole 2 weeks later and immediately fled the state with her newborn. She hasn't spoken publicly about what happened, but according to her mother, she left a sealed envelope with instructions to open it if anything happens to me. The contents of that envelope remain unknown. The wall of silence extended beyond Lakewood's walls. When journalists from the Tribune began investigating the pregnancies, their Freedom of Information Act requests were denied for security concerns. When they attempted to interview former guards who had been terminated, they discovered many had signed unusually restrictive non-disclosure agreements with severance packages far above standard. But one former guard was willing to talk, though only anonymously. "There was a group of them, higher-ups, who had access to all areas of the facility," the guard explained. "They called it night rounds. They'd take women from solitary, sometimes 2 or 3 a night. If any of us regular guards asked questions, we'd find ourselves on report for something we didn't do the next day. Write enough of those reports, and you're fired." The guard claimed that medical staff were involved too. How else do you explain 7 pregnancies? Someone was turning off the cameras, someone was opening the doors, someone was sedating these women, and someone was making sure there weren't records of anything happening. What was happening at Lakewood wasn't just individual abuse, it was systematic, organized, protected. Jennifer Watson, Vanessa's cellmate, provided the most damning testimony at a closed hearing for the State Prison Oversight Board. According to leaked transcripts, Watson testified that Vanessa had discovered a pattern of female inmates being targeted, specifically those without family support, those with prior drug offenses, and those nearing release. Vanessa figured out they were using these women as part of some kind of sick game, Watson testified. The pregnancies weren't accidents, they were the point. There were bets placed on which women would conceive, money changing hands, and records being falsified to cover it all up. Watson's testimony should have launched a full investigation. Instead, 3 days after her hearing, she was transferred to a maximum security facility 4 states away for security concerns. Her subsequent letters to Vanessa's mother and the Oversight Board were returned as undeliverable. The most chilling evidence came 6 months after Vanessa's death, when a maintenance worker found a phone hidden in an air duct near the administrative offices. On it were videos that showed exactly what had been happening during those night rounds. The worker turned the phone over to his supervisor. The next day, the maintenance worker was fired for theft of prison property. The phone was never entered into evidence. For nearly a year, the case seemed destined to remain buried. Another tragedy lost in a system designed to protect itself rather than seek justice. But then something unexpected happened. One of the men involved got scared and started talking. Officer Ryan Phillips had been at Lakewood for 8 years when he approached the FBI with his story. According to case files, Phillips had been part of the night rounds group, but claimed he'd only participated as a lookout, never in the actual assaults. He came forward after learning that 3 other officers involved had died in separate accidents: a car crash, a home invasion, and a drowning. "I think they're cleaning house," Phillips told federal investigators. "Getting rid of anyone who might talk. I'm not waiting around to be next." Phillips provided names, dates, and details that corroborated what Vanessa had written in her missing journal. He identified 12 correctional officers, 2 nurses, and 3 administrators involved in the systematic abuse. Most damning, he implicated Warden Harold Bennett as not just aware of the abuse, but its orchestrator. Bennett called it his breeding program, Phillips claimed in his sworn statement. He had this sick theory about creating a new generation of inmates, said he was studying criminal genetics, but really it was about power, control. These women were just lab rats to him. Phillips also confirmed what many had suspected: Vanessa Mitchell was murdered to keep her silent. Bennett ordered it himself, said she was going to bring down the whole program with what she knew. They drugged her food at dinner, waited until the sedatives took effect. Then Walker and Stevens went in and made it look like suicide. The FBI opened a full investigation, but progress has been painfully slow. Phillips was placed in witness protection, but his testimony alone isn't enough for the widespread charges the case demands. Federal agents have been methodically building their case, interviewing former inmates, subpoenaing records, and tracking financial transactions between the implicated staff. Meanwhile, the 7 children born from these assaults are now 4 years old. They and their mothers live with trauma that may never fully heal. 3 of the women have attempted suicide. 2 have disappeared entirely. No forwarding addresses, no social media, no trace. They simply vanished after their release, perhaps out of fear, perhaps from shame, or perhaps because the same people who silenced Vanessa found them too. For Patricia Mitchell, justice for her daughter feels both tantalizingly close and frustratingly elusive. "I know who killed my baby," she says, her voice steady with restrained fury. "I know their names. I know where they work. Some of them are still at that prison, and every day they're free is another day I can't breathe." Patricia has transformed her grief into action. She founded Justice for Vanessa, an organization advocating for better oversight of correctional facilities and protection for incarcerated women. Every Saturday, she stands outside Lakewood with a small but growing group of supporters, holding signs with her daughter's face. The prison has installed privacy screens to block their protest from inmates' view. Rebecca Simmons, after years of silence, has finally begun speaking about her experience, though only through her attorney. She's filed a federal lawsuit against the State Department of Corrections, Warden Bennett, and 11 other staff members. The state has fought to keep the case sealed, claiming national security implications. A bizarre defense that has raised even more questions about what was really happening at Lakewood. The most recent development came just last month, when an anonymous source provided journalists with copies of emails between Warden Bennett and several high-ranking state officials. The emails, if authenticated, suggest knowledge of the program extended far beyond prison walls, possibly reaching the governor's office. The emails reference promising results and continued funding for something called Project Genesis. Special Agent Catherine Powell, who leads the FBI investigation, will only say that the case remains active and progressing. Sources within the Bureau indicate indictments may be forthcoming, but the scope of the conspiracy and the power of those involved have complicated efforts to build an airtight case. For the women who survived Lakewood, justice can't come soon enough. Jennifer Watson, finally located in a Wyoming facility, continues to fight for her own safety. "I wake up every night thinking they're coming for me," she wrote in a recent letter to Patricia. "I told the truth about what Vanessa found and I'm still paying for it, but I won't stop. She wouldn't stop if it was me who died." The search for Vanessa's missing journal continues. Patricia believes it contains the names and evidence that would break the case wide open. Vanessa was meticulous. She documented everything, Patricia says. That journal is the key, and someone knows where it is. As for Lily, now 8 years old, she still asks about her mother. Patricia has finally found the words to explain what happened in terms a child can understand. "I told her that her mommy tried to help people who were being hurt, and that made some bad people angry. I told her that her mommy was a hero," Patricia's voice breaks, "and I promised her that someday the people who took her mommy away would be punished. I just hope I can keep that promise." The Lakewood case represents more than just the murder of Vanessa Mitchell. It exposes the darkest possibilities of unchecked power. What can happen when those tasked with enforcing justice become its greatest violators? It reveals how easily systems can be corrupted and how difficult those corruptions are to uproot. Today, as the FBI investigation continues, as lawsuits make their slow way through courts, as former inmates struggle to rebuild shattered lives, and as 7 children grow up bearing the legacy of unimaginable abuse, one question remains at the center of it all. How many more Vanessas are out there, documenting abuses no one wants to see, fighting battles against systems designed to crush them, and facing the ultimate silencing when they get too close to the truth? The search for answers continues, and hope never dies. If unsolved mysteries like this move you, stories of women who became victims of a system meant to rehabilitate them, families who refuse to give up, and the belief that truth will eventually surface, then you're exactly where you belong. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something and you believe answers are still out there. And listen, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Every single week, we dive deep into cases that law enforcement gave up on, stories that mainstream media won't touch, and mysteries that deserve answers. Your subscription literally helps us investigate more cases, reach more families, and maybe, just maybe, help solve these crimes. We're not just telling stories here, we're fighting for justice, one case at a time. Subscribe right now and join our growing army of truth seekers who refuse to let these cases die in forgotten file cabinets. Hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Some of these revelations will absolutely blow your mind. And please, share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might hold a piece of the puzzle. What detail in this case bothered you the most? What do you think investigators should have done differently? Do you have theories about what really happened? Let us know in the comments below. Your perspective might be exactly what's needed to crack this case. What unsolved mystery should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, the search for answers continues and every case deserves to be solved.